Namaskar, Jai Shri Krishna. Enlightening, text 17 and text 18 of chapter 6.Purusa-Sukta confirmed of second canto, the cosmic manifestation of Srimad Bhagavatam, text 17. Swadhishnyam pratapan prano bahishacha pratapatyasau evam virajam pratapamsta patyantara bahiha puman. The sun illuminates both internally and externally by expanding its radiation. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by expanding his universal form, maintains everything in the creation both internally and externally. The universal form of the Lord, or the impersonal feature of the Lord, known as the Brahmajyoti, is clearly explained here and compared to the radiation of the sun. The sunshine may expand all over the universe, but the source of the sunshine, namely the sun planet or the deity known as Narayana-parayana, is the basis of such radiation. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is the basis of the impersonal Brahmajyoti radiation or the impersonal feature of the Lord. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 14.27. So the universal form of the Lord is the secondary imagination of the impersonal form of the Lord, but the primary form of the Lord is Shyama Sundar with two hands playing on his eternal flute. 75% of the expansive radiation of the Lord is manifested in the spiritual sky, Tripad Vibhuti, and 25% of his personal radiation comprehends the entire expansion of the material universes. It is also explained and stated in the Bhagavad Gita 10.42. Thus, the 75% expansion of his radiation is called the internal potency, whereas the 25% expansion is called the external energy of the Lord. The living entities who are residents of the spiritual as well as the material expansions are his marginal energy, Tatastha Shakti, and they are at liberty to live in either of the energies, external or internal. Those who live within the spiritual expansion of the Lord are called liberated souls, whereas the residents of the external expansion are called the conditioned souls. We can just make an estimate of the number of the residents of the internal expansions in comparison to the number of residents in the external energy and may easily conclude that the liberated souls are far more numerous than the conditioned souls. Text 18. So amruta sya bhayasyesho martya mannam yadatya gat mahi maisha tato brahman purushastya duratyayah. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the controller of immortality and fearlessness, and he is transcendental to death and the fruitive actions of the material world. O Narad, O Brahman, it is therefore difficult to measure the glories of the Supreme Person. The glories of the Lord in the transcendental 75% of the Lord's internal potency are stated in the Padma Puran Uttarakhanda. It is said there that those planets in the spiritual sky which comprise the 75% expansion of the internal potency of the Lord are far, far greater than those planets in the total universes composed of the external potency of the Lord. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the total universes in the external potency of the Lord are compared to a bucketful of mustard seeds. One mustard seed is calculated to be a universe itself. In one of the universes in which we are now living, the number of planets cannot be counted by human energy, and so how we can think of the sum total in all the universes which are compared to a bucketful of mustard seeds. And the planets in the spiritual sky are at least 3 times the number of those in the material sky. Such planets being spiritual are in fact transcendental to the material mode, therefore they are constituted in the mode of unalloyed goodness only. The conception of spiritual bliss, Brahmananda, is fully present in those planets. Each of them is eternal, indestructible, and free from all kinds of inevitabilities experienced in the material world. Each of them is self-illuminating and more powerfully dazzling than if we can imagine the total sunshine of millions of mundane suns. The inhabitants of those planets are liberated from birth, death, old age, and diseases and have full knowledge of everything. They are all godly and free from all sorts of material hankerings. They have nothing to do there except to render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Narayana, who is the predominating deity of such Vaikuntha planets. Those liberated souls are engaged incessantly in singing songs mentioned in the Sam Ved, Vedaiha Sangapada Kramo Panishadair Gayanti Yama Samgaha. All of them are personifications of the 5 Upanishads. Tripad Vibhuti, or the 75% known as the internal potency of the Lord, is to be understood as the kingdom of God far beyond the material sky. And when we speak of Pada Vibhuti, or the 25% comprising his external energy, we should understand that this refers to the sphere of the material world. It is also said in the Padma Puran that the kingdom of Tripad Vibhuti is transcendental, whereas the Pad Vibhuti is mundane. Tripad Vibhuti is eternal, whereas the Pad Vibhuti is transient. The Lord and his eternal servitors in the transcendental kingdom all have eternal forms which are auspicious, infallible, spiritual, and eternally youthful. In other words, there is no birth, death, old age, and disease. That eternal land is full of transcendental enjoyment and full of beauty and bliss. This very fact is also corroborated in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the transcendental nature is described as Amruta. As described in the Vedas, Uttamurta Tvasye Shanaha, the Supreme Lord is the Lord of immortality, or in other words, the Lord is immortal, and because He is the Lord of immortality, He can award immortality to His devotees. In the Bhagavad Gita 8.16, the Lord also assured that whoever may go to His abode of immortality shall never return to this mortal land of threefold miseries. The Lord is not like the mundane Lord. The mundane master or Lord never enjoys equally with his subordinates, nor is the mundane Lord immortal, nor can he award immortality to his subordinate. The Supreme Lord, who is the leader of all living entities, can award all the qualities of his personality unto his devotees, including immortality and spiritual bliss. In the material world, there is always anxiety and fearfulness in the hearts of all living entities, but the Lord, being himself the supreme, fearless, also awards the same quality of fearlessness to his pure devotees. Mundane existence is itself a kind of fear, because in all the mundane bodies the effects of birth, death, old age and disease always keep a living being compact and fear. In the mundane world, there is always the influence of time, which changes things from one stage to another, and the living entity, originally being a vikar or unchangeable, suffers a great deal on account of changes due to the influence of time. The changing effects of eternal time are conspicuously absent in the immortal kingdom of God, which should therefore be understood to have no influence of time and therefore no fear whatsoever. In the material world, so-called happiness is the result of one's own work. One can become a rich man by dint of one's own hard labor, and there are always fear and doubts as to the duration of such acquired happiness. But in the kingdom of God, no one has to endeavor to attain a standard of happiness. Happiness is the nature of the spirit. As stated in the Vedanta Sutras, Anandamayo Abhyasat, the spirit is by nature full of happiness. Happiness in spiritual nature always increases in volume. With a new phase of appreciation, there is no question of decreasing the bliss. Such unalloyed spiritual bliss is nowhere to be found within the orbit of the material universe, including the Janaloka planets, or for that matter the Maharlok or Satyalok planets, because even Lord Brahma is subject to the laws of fruitive actions and the law of birth and death. It is therefore stated here, Duratyayaha, or in other words, spiritual happiness in the eternal kingdom of God cannot be imagined even by the great brahmacharis or sannyasis who are eligible to be promoted to the planets beyond the region of heaven. So the greatness of the Supreme Lord is so great that it cannot be imagined even by the great brahmacharis or sannyasis, but such happiness is actually attained by the unaware devotees of the Lord by His divine grace. Hare Krishna.